Noisy Norman. Mrs. Tortoise said that little tortoises should be seen and not heard. But you couldn't help hearing Norman. Norman was so noisy. Whenever he wanted to say anything, he yelled and shrieked. Whenever he went anywhere, he crashed and banged. That's Norman. "I do wish Norman didn't get up so early," said Mrs. Tortoise. "It's such a long day with all that noise." And Mr. Tortoise had a bright idea. "Let's get Norman a paper round. Paper boys start at the crack of dawn." And Norman liked his new job, but he didn't just deliver the papers. He rattled the letterboxes and yelled, "Read all about it! Read all about it!" at the top of his voice. Nobody wanted to read all about it, not at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Norman got the sack. "I do wish Norman didn't go to bed so late," said Mrs. Tortoise. "It's such a long day with all that noise." And Mr. Tortoise had an idea. Norman can join a band. Musicians are meant to be noisy, and they work late. The band leader gave Norman a triangle. He explained what to do. Wait for the pianist to finish playing, then go ting, ting, ting. But Norman couldn't wait for the pianist to finish. As soon as the music started, he went crash, bang, wallop. He jumped up and down and shrieked, out of tune. Whoa! The pianist was annoyed. The band leader was unhappy. He asked Norman to leave the band. And Mr. Tortoise had run out of ideas. So Mrs. Tortoise took Norman to the doctor. The doctor jumped when Norman crashed into his surgery. He covered his ears when Norman yelled, "Hello!" "I need some whisper medicine for Norman," said Mrs. Tortoise. The doctor looked through his catalogue. "I'm sorry," he said. "Whisper medicine hasn't been invented yet." And he wrote something on a piece of paper and gave it to Mrs. Tortoise. It turned out to be the name of a karate school. Mrs. Tortoise fixed up karate lessons straight away. "Now you can jump up and down and be noisy," she told Norman. "Just watch the others," said the instructor. "You can join in next week." But Norman couldn't wait for next week. "Look at me!" he shrieked. His cry shattered the windows in the karate hall. The instructor was shattered too, and he sent Norman home with a note. "Don't ever send Norman again." Mrs. Tortoise didn't know what to do next. Then the fair came to town. "Off you go," said Mrs. Tortoise. "You can be as noisy as you like at the fair." And Norman jumped up and down with excitement. He was even noisier than usual. La 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 la. "I want to go on the dodgems," yelled Norman, and suddenly the dodgems were full. "I've won a coconut!" shrieked Norman, and suddenly everyone was at the coconut shy. "Lovely candy floss!" cried Norman. There was soon a huge queue for the candy floss. The fairground manager came to see Norman's parents. "We don't need to advertise with Norman about," he said. "Can you spare him for a few evenings?" What a wonderful arrangement! Norman's big voice brought business to the fair, and Mr. and Mrs. Tortoise had a rest from Norman's noise.